It always was confusing to me that they skipped around the Bible a lot, but nobody explained to me how the Bible was set up.
What do you wish other Christians understood about what it's like to be new to the faith?
That's a tough question.
There's a lot of energy and time and resources that are to get to people to come to the faith. And then I feel like it's just kind of like... This is take 2 because we recorded everything in chipmunk mode, which I literally tested the audio. I checked everything before, and then whenever I went to go check, it was like high-pitched chipmunk.
We were listening to me cackling in chipmunk mode. It was great.
Yeah.
Give you a good laugh.
Honestly, man, these are the things that's like, it's going to be a good interview, though, because, like, when those things happen, it's like, man, this has to be... Like when cameras just shut off, equipment starts not working, I've tested, retested, like that's when it's like, man, there's something bigger going on here, like some spiritual attacks happening. So
confirmed.
Absolutely. But we rebuke any spiritual attacks in Jesus' name. I'm telling you right now, we will get this podcast out. But I wanted to start with how we met. So we were kind of reminiscing, and but you started dating my brother. And that's ultimately kind of what brought it back together. But I would say we really started hanging out after a family gathering that we had with everybody. And that brings me right into the point of how I see Christ in you. And I kid you not, it is the first time I think I've ever experienced unconditional love. And I remember at first being like almost confused by it. Because it was like, there's no way. Like, she doesn't know who I am. How can she even love me? But it was just this instant acceptance and warmth and, like, almost a desire to protect, it felt like. Like, you were just like, you're mine. Like, I'm gonna help you. Yep. Like, whatever you need, like, I'm here for you.
I am 100% there for you from day one.
Genuinely, though, and you're the first person I've ever felt like that, where it's like, I didn't have to earn or, be accepted. It was like, it's just, I was.
Yeah.
And so that characteristic, I think, is so rare, and it impacted me forever. Like, really? I literally, oh my gosh, 100%. And I instantly knew too. I was like, she's here to stay. Like, I put your name as Ashley Mendoza whenever I first met you, and I was like, no, like she's here. Like, you felt closer and more like family than a lot of family members have in the past. You know what I mean? Like, it was just instant. Like, we're family.
Yeah,
so
we're connected.
Yeah. So I love that about you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You have became more of a sister to me than my own sister over the years. Me and my sister drifted apart. Like, she's out in California doing her own life, and we honestly, like, don't talk much. I mean, we talk, like, here and there, and we send, like, those reels or whatever.
Sure.
But there's no, like, real in-depth conversations anymore. It's like, I don't even know who I would call if something happened to her. Like, I don't know anything about her anymore. So, and that's partially my fault too for not reaching out and staying in touch. But yeah, I feel like I have really just gained a major life impacting connection with you that is just, it's changed my life.
I agree.
Like, I love it.
Me too.
I absolutely love it.
Me too.
I will say my parents have always taught me that, you treat people like you want to be treated. And especially when it comes to family, because they, that's all you're going to get. You can choose your family. I've heard that before. But, now that we are family, it's even bigger to me. And 100%. It makes my heart even bigger for you. So
thank you.
Yeah.
I feel the exact same. Like, there was an instant connection. And I think for me, feeling accepted by somebody really helped me to, like, kind of put my guard down, because for a long time I felt like I had to be performative or
like meet a certain standard and
totally
do all the things and feel like you're on the spotlight of, like, oh, we gotta watch my behavior, and
totally.
I get that.
And I definitely didn't expect it from my brother's significant other. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's like whatever. But yeah, instantly. And it also really impacted me when I was like, I want to hang out with Ashley. You know what I mean? It's like not that you're like at just family gatherings and it's like, oh, it's Mateo's other half, Ashley. It's like, no, I want to, like, go and just hang out with Ashley. You know what I mean? So it was like, that's when I was like, oh wow, like, I'm really connecting. Like, it was super cool. And like you said, like, I'm closer to you, I would say, than honestly probably any of my other siblings. I talk to you more than I do Mateo now at this point.
We talk every day.
Yeah.
Which has been wonderful, honestly. Like, when you were like, you need someone to say good morning to, and I was like, you know what? that even, we fail sometimes.
Sure.
It's like good morning times 2.
But
it's not about that.
Totally. And it's nice to know, and I appreciated you being so receptive to that too, because it's nice to know that's like, okay, somebody knows, like, when you live alone and you're single and by yourself and you're like, wow, if I just fall off the face of the earth, I don't think
Nobody
anybody's going to know.
Yeah.
So it was really nice to be like, I have somebody to be like, hey, good morning. And like, you're checking in, you know, and you have me on Life 360 too. So you can totally
like, because honestly, I was talking to Mateo about it. I'm like, what happens if something happened to her? Does anybody there like have our information to be like, hey, you know, your sister just got into a car accident or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know who we would even contact, other than I would probably reach out to your boss, honestly.
Yeah, that's
at this
true.
point. So I was like, we need to at least have her on Life 360.
Yeah, I'll have to share that with my emergency contact, Sarah Willis, if you're watching this. But she's my local person, emergency contact, so I'll have to share y'all's information. But yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Getting some logistics out of the way. I love it.
I'm glad we got that cleared up.
Yeah.
On air.
But one of the biggest reasons I wanted to have you on is because you have come into your faith more recently. And I feel like there's such a gap between starting out in faith and being new and then being like seasoned in the faith. And I feel like there's a lot of energy and time and resources that are to get to people to come to the faith. And then I feel like it's just kind of like gone.
Like, oh, we got you.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next
and then
the next people that want to come in.
Yeah, and then there's like resources for when you're wanting to dive really deep into the faith, like Bible studies and you know, commentary. And I think those are great avenues as well if you're newer to the faith. But I feel like there's a gap. And I wanted to get your perspective on how, one, we can do better in the church to encourage and help younger Christians in the faith like grow, but then also the perspective from you for those people that are there right now and they're just like, dude, I don't know what to do.
Right.
So
yeah,
I wanted to start with first like what your thoughts of like God and Christianity were to even begin with. I know that your parents believed in God, but not necessarily traditional in the sense of like going to church or reading the Bible. So I was super curious, like what you even thought of God and Christianity in general before you came to your faith.
Right. Okay. So with my parents, like we went to church like maybe 2 times my whole life. And my Aunt Virgie, I will say, I did forget that on the first take, but she's a full believer Christian, always never skipped a day in church, you know, and but I always respected that. But like when we went to visit her, she lived in Oklahoma, I never really got it, you know, and just sitting there like, okay, well, they're in church, so we're going to go play over here or whatever, you know. So like it didn't feel like church, I guess, to me. Like I didn't understand the concept. But with the church, like say we went whenever I was younger, that didn't really mean anything to me either, because nobody really explained anything of like what it was or who he was, or, you know, like here's a Bible. I don't think they ever gave me a Bible. I think we just used the ones that were in the back of the pews, you know, that everybody used. Nobody explained how to like open it and find things in there. Like when they're like, oh, turn to this, and you're just sitting there like, where, this thing is huge, where do you want me to turn to? Like, am I going? And I'm looking around, like trying not to be obvious about looking around, you know. So it was like, it's intimidating, but yeah. So I didn't know really anything at all. Coming in, I'm glad though that it happened that way.
Why is that?
Because it gave me a chance to figure out a lot about myself first, and a lot of trials and tribulations that I went through alone, and then having to realize that it could have went so much differently if I would have accepted Christ. And so, like, while I'm not upset about it, it could have been a lot easier, but I'm glad that I did go through the things that I did, and I am where I am right now, like, because I believe that everything does happen for a reason.
Totally.
And I believe that the reason is still unknown to each individual, probably. But whenever you came around was whenever I was like gung-ho. I'm like, okay, finally someone that can explain it to me on a different level. Like you and I have a connection where you can explain it to me, talk through problems, talk through the Bible. If I had any questions about the Bible, I know that you're right there. And I've asked you multiple times on certain things, so it's been helpful. But I just used to think, back to your original question, I used to think that God was just something in the sky, possibly, maybe a being, maybe like a alien, like I didn't really understand the concept of what he even was, a spirit, a ghost, or whatever that may be. That was never really anything on my mind. I just didn't know.
Yeah.
I guess you could call it ignorance. Ignorance is bliss.
A weird concept, though, especially if you haven't come or started with the faith, like the idea of a God. I think a lot of people, of course, know of like a higher power if they've heard of something like that.
Yeah.
But the idea of like a God that would come down,
Yeah.
die for your sins, like that's just like, wait, what? And then you hear weird things like covered by the blood of Jesus, and you're like, you put some man's blood on you.
Right. Yeah. And that was a lot of it too. Was just hearing certain things. Like, so I did watch the Passion of the Christ.
Yeah.
So that was like, holy moly. I was like, this all happened.
It's intense.
Coming from someone that didn't know anything about religion or about the Bible or how it all happened, other than he got nailed to a cross, I think is all I really knew. And I didn't know why. I was like, okay, that's kind of weird. So watching that movie was a big eye-opener. That's whenever I decided to go to church, actually, whenever I was living in New Jersey.
Okay.
So there you go.
Wow.
Aha.
That's cool.
And I remember watching that movie and just being absolutely just, like, I had a feeling in my stomach of, like, oh my gosh, like, wow, that's insane that he went through all of that, So I do know some things now, but back then I didn't know anything. And I remember wanting to watch that movie, but having to pick the right time to watch it because, like, you don't know what you're getting into.
I love to hear that the movie Passion of Christ was like what brought you to, it seems like your first maybe curiosity or like it even sounds like maybe the Holy Spirit was drawing you in with that because you were like, whoa, like he did that for me. Yeah. Where it kind of almost hit home to see like a visual representation of it. So I think
more with that movie than I did my whole life.
Yeah. Totally. And I think we can like forget like how things like that can be so impactful too. You know what I mean? Like somebody would be like, oh, it's just a movie, but it's like, no, like it, like The Chosen. I've had people reach out to me recently, and it's like a series on the TV. Okay. And it walks through kind of like the Gospels. And it like follows Jesus, and it's like the coolest thing ever. It's like Game of Thrones, but like for the Bible. It's super cool. I love it. Awesome. And since giving up Game of Thrones too, like because the nudity and stuff, I was like, man, I really want kind of like a timed age piece. It's kind of like adventure-y, but like, and it's like, oh my gosh, like The Chosen. And I started it. I couldn't stop watching it. Really? It's so good. I highly recommend it.
I'll have to put that on our list.
Yeah, and it's been the same though, where people have reached out and have shared with me that they're like, hey, like The Chosen was part of what brought me to my faith that I have today. And it's just, I think it's making what feels intangible in a book like the Bible, and it makes it come to life to a way that people can understand and feel. You know what I mean? So
yeah, well, yeah, definitely. And I'm a visual learner. Me too. So like you have to take that in consideration. Like people, it's hard to read sometimes, even comprehend what you read. So that was a big one for me too. I could read a paragraph of it and not be able to comprehend it or understand it, and I have to read it 5, 6, 7 times and still end up with nothing to show for it. And I'm like, okay, well, this just is not for me. So I gave up multiple times trying. I tried totally over the years, but it was definitely life-changing to see that movie, and that's whenever I did decide to take the children to church. Sorry. Yeah, that was pretty impactful though, and like I said, very scary.
Yeah, I totally get that. Is that kind of like, because one of the questions I want to ask you was if there was like a moment in life when you first felt drawn to God. Would you say that was one of them, or was it maybe earlier?
Definitely growing up, I did have something that made me want to have, like, I was curious, by all means curious, because I grew up in a small town and everybody went to church on Sunday. Everybody went to church on Sunday. And I'm like, what is the big deal here? Like, why are you all going to church? And like, because I remember I worked at McDonald's at the time, and I'd see all the kids that I went to school with, they'd come in with their families after church. And I'm like, what is going on at these churches? And then my friend Robin, I actually went to church with her a few times. I want to say I was probably like 10, 11, somewhere around there. And I just remember the same thing. It was so boring and just like it didn't make sense. I didn't know what they were talking about, and that was the kids section at that time. But I just don't think that I was ready, like to really, only go once or twice ever then. Yeah, it just it didn't make any sense. So I went away from it again. Then coming back to it as a young adult, I want to say I was in my early 20s at that time, whenever I had watched the movie and decided I was going to go ahead and take my children to church, that they needed to learn and know and be able to make their own decisions moving forward about if they were going to believe or not. But I wanted to give them the option to instill that in them.
Totally.
So
was there a moment that you then decided later in life that you're like, okay, God is real, I'm going to give my life to Christ?
I wouldn't say there was an exact moment. I would say that your brother had a lot to do with that, though, because we have a lot of in-depth conversations, and we both were kind of in that standstill of like, he had been in the church for a long time and kind of, crammed all this stuff down your throat of this is what you do and this is what you believe and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I want to make my own decisions. I'm tired of people telling me what to do.
Totally.
And I'm like, well, I don't even know anything about it. So why don't we just kind of learn together, And he's like, I don't know what to really believe right now. And I was like, I don't either. So, like, we're kind of just going to start this on our own. Like, and where we may land, we will. And so we started talking about it a lot more, started not reading the Bible, but, there's shows on Netflix even that go over the history of it, and certain, like Noah. That was really good. And he goes, that was nothing like and I was like, oh, but it was like super awesome. Like it had my attention from beginning to end, and I was like, okay, well that's unfortunate. But so then I was like, okay, well let me go read it now that I understand it and I have this visual representation of it now. And it wasn't too far off, let's say, but it was pretty close, and that helped me a lot. So then after that, that's whenever, cause I know that you and I had talked, at the family gathering actually. And I was like, I don't really believe. Like, I think, do you remember that conversation that we had?
Because I didn't really believe at that time either. Yeah. So we were both talking about Jordan Peterson and curious, like, why he was starting to come to faith. Yeah. And we were like, we're kind of interested in, like, looking into it. And I was like, I believe in a higher power. This was when I was in my spiritual age, It's like, I believe in a higher power, but, like, I don't know about Jesus,
And that's the same exact mentality that Mateo had. Yeah. And I think maybe everybody kind of goes through that and grows. Yeah. Possibly.
I think it's important to come to your own
conclusions about it.
Totally. Yeah. And that's a pivotal moment for, it was for myself. It sounds like it was for you. It sounds like it was for Mateo. Yeah. So
definitely.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, it helped to have that, if he wasn't here, then I would have eventually probably came to faith, because, like I said, I've been curious about it for my whole life, just off and on. Totally. So it would have eventually happened. Totally. But I'm glad that it did.
Yeah. God pursues, man. Like, it's crazy. Like, looking back on my life, I can see so many times where God was chasing after me, and it was always the thing that I was running away from him with, too. Yeah. He'd find me there, and it'd be like, oh, like, run away again.
There you are.
Oh, yeah. He constantly pursues. Right. You know what I mean? So I'm sure that there would have been another way that he did if he didn't. But I love that he used Mateo to do that, because now I have you. Yeah. Yeah, so it's awesome. I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I will say, so whenever I was living in Versailles, when I moved back from New Jersey, I sent you that picture, actually, and I said, what do you see in this picture? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That was that other time before Mateo and I started dating. So that was probably 2 years before I met Mateo, that I took that picture. I remember the day I was driving. I was living next to him, actually. I was driving back home. Haven was in the car, and she had mentioned something about God. And I look up and I see that, and I was like, I have to take a picture. Like, I have to take a picture of that. That looks like God's hand reaching out, like, just like, here, take this minute and instill it in your heart. So that's whenever that was the other time. So I've had multiple times where it's like, aha, something needs to happen here. And I just didn't stick with it. So I am determined this time, and I'm not going to let it go away again. So.
Totally. Yeah. I can even see like the difference though from like when we first met to now, and I'm sure vice versa too, is like you seem like you have more peace, you seem like you have more purpose, you seem like you the unconditional love, we didn't think it could get better, but like it genuinely, it's just there's a different sense about you. Do you feel different?
I feel a lot different.
Okay.
I've battled with depression my entire life. Like my entire life. And while I have seasons, and I don't think that'll ever, go away, I think everybody kind of deals with that here and there. I've had some really, really, really low parts of my life, and some that I'm not proud of. I think a lot of people go through that too, but and coming out on the other side of that is another aha moment where you're just like, okay, he's got me.
Totally.
Like, he's catching me every single time. So, like, when are you going to stand up and stay up? Right? So that is now.
I love that.
That's where I'm going.
That's awesome. Okay, so something I wanted to ask about your perspective from being newer to the faith, and I know that there was a ton of like revelations that I had whenever I came to the faith in the beginning, where I was like, wait, what? Like this is not true, or this is true, or that's what that means. And so I was kind of curious if, like, what would you say is the biggest either lie that you used to believe about yourself, Christ, or Christianity that you now kind of see differently?
That's a tough question.
Yeah.
Oh. I don't really know how to answer that, honestly.
Do you think there's a perspective that's changed for you over your life, or even like the viewpoint that you've had, or
well,
maybe
I know that you and I have talked about it a lot, learning patience. That is like one of I'm quick to snap. And I don't know why, but patience has probably been the biggest thing for me. Every time that I come back to God, I do feel more at peace. I feel more patient. I feel more kind. I feel like I can give more of me to other people. And I didn't used to be that way. I'm an introvert. I pretend to be an extrovert because of my job and stuff. So it's a lot of work, but I didn't used to be as bubbly and friendly and kind and caring. I used to just think about myself, and I was a very selfish person. Didn't really care to grow relationships at all, even with, I was married before. Yeah. I was dedicated, don't get me wrong, but I didn't care to, like, care,
Sure.
I wasn't, like, 1,000% in, but it just wasn't right, and now I know that. But, as far as, I don't know. That's a really tough question.
It is. I know. I'm sorry. I was curious though, because I feel like a lie that I had, and that's kind of, I guess, the angle that I was going into is like that God wants me to do good for him. Like it was like that he wants something from me. And that was one of the biggest lies I took into the faith. So I was curious if there was something like that, but I think that can be a common one in general, though, is just like that God wants me to follow his book of rules.
Right. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. The 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
I was always told about those. And I think it's usually in a joke or a song or something that I ever heard it in. And so, like, I never really looked into it. So, like, thou shalt not kill, stuff like that. And it was usually, like I said, a joke or whatever. But, like, obviously those aren't lies. Like, yeah, and you follow those.
Totally. And I would also say that my realization, at least, or the lie, if you will, that I used to believe was like, I need to follow these to make God happy. And then I realized, I was like, whoa, wait a second. Everything that God has said for me to do in the Bible has been for my benefit. It may not feel good in the moment, but it's for my benefit. Kind of like running. You know what I mean? Like, that's great for your heart, cardiovascular health, endurance, everything.
But it sucks.
It sucks in the moment.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing as like where I think I just saw God as this man in the sky that wanted me to live perfectly.
Right.
And then I realized
it's not possible.
It's not. And then I realized it was a relationship. And that's where my like relationship with Christ completely changed, where it was like, oh, you love me? Like you want the best for me? And then I started trusting him and his commandments, even when I don't understand why. You know what I mean? Because like, I was lukewarm for a really long time, where I would like live with my boyfriend and sleep with my boyfriend and at the time. And I didn't see an issue with that. I was going to church, I was serving, I was, dedicated to the Lord, I thought. But I was like, I'm going to cherry pick. I want to follow all these things, but I don't want to like be pure or focus on purity.
Yeah.
And then it was a night and day difference whenever I started following those things. Even though I didn't see the point, it was more so that I started to understand the character and nature of God. And I was like, okay, if you're telling me to do this, it's not because you need something from me, because trust me, there's nothing I can give you.
Or so you think.
Yeah, well, there's nothing I can give God. He has
Everybody
everything.
can give something, and it's love.
Sweet. I like that perspective. That's good. But totally. And it was like, okay, I can trust this being at the time. I didn't know who it was, or I didn't have an intimate relationship. And now it's just like, wow, like, I don't know, it's different.
Yeah.
So that was a lie I believed. And that's kind of why I wanted to touch on it. But I love to hear that.
Well, everybody tells you, they're like, oh, you have to give your life to God. And I'm like, well, what does that mean?
Totally.
Like, nobody explains what it means.
Yeah.
It, like, to people like me. It's like, you can say all these things and tell me all your rules, but I explain the why. I'm a why person.
Me too.
You have to explain it to me, and I have to, like, literally understand what you're saying, or it's not going to take.
I'm the exact same. Yeah. And that was also another struggle I had early in my faith, was I was asking, I guess, maybe a little bit harder questions, and a lot of times I was given the response of like, well, his ways are above our ways, his understanding is above our understanding.
Right.
And I do agree with that. It's biblical. There's a verse that literally says that.
Right.
But
it's not beneficial to learning.
Well, it's like it also says he gives wisdom abundantly to those who asks. I think sometimes people can get intimidated by certain questions in the church. And like, why would a good God let bad things happen?
Right.
And I feel like I've found really wholesome and soul fulfilling answers to those things.
Well, that's good.
For sure.
That is a big question, though, that I hear a lot of people ask. That is a good point that you made, though.
Totally.
If God is so great and he loves you and he loves all of us, then why does he let cancer happen? Why does he let people die? Why does he let this, like, and you can ask all those questions a million times, but it's like, it's not yours to decide.
Yeah, I think that it's
or maybe to know.
That's true, and I think that's probably the case. But I started realizing that the lack of an answer is the lack of wisdom, not that there isn't one. God is holy. God literally is perfect. There has to be an answer. And so once I realized that, I started seeking those things.
Yeah.
And started finding answers.
Yeah.
And there's even a ministry called Great Questions in Dallas, Texas at Watermark Community Church. You can go and ask any question you want, literally. And like somebody asked, like, how is free will a thing if I didn't choose the family I was born into? I was like, yeah, answer that. I want to know.
You're like, I'm waiting.
Yeah. And so I think it's awesome to open up, especially people who are newer into the faith, to say, like, ask anything and be that person as well, if you're on the other side of like being receptive, and also being okay with saying, like, you know what, I don't know.
Yeah, and sometimes that is definitely like what I would have to say.
Totally.
I don't know.
All
I definitely don't know, trust me.
All of us, yeah. I wanted to also ask you, has there ever been a moment where you truly felt like seen and accepted in your walk or faith? So it sounds like maybe there was a church that connected with you. Was that maybe like the first time?
Yeah, so that was the first time I actually felt accepted into any type of religion. And I don't know if it was because I made the decision on my own to go, and that I was determined to, let my children lead that life as well. But I went to this church, and it was a huge church too, but it was close, and it wasn't, it was. I walked in, and there's everybody, the little coffee bars, and like they got donuts and stuff over there. I'm like, okay, it's nice and quiet in here, and nobody's like cackle laughing, and you know how you go in and like it's overwhelming because like you hear so many people just like so loud, and that to me is overwhelming, especially if I'm new. But I walked in and I seen all these people, and they're just like normal people. There's a good mix of young and old and little kids running around, but respectively running around, and they're all nicely dressed. And I'm like, this is like a dream. Like, this is how I envisioned church should be, is is walking into that church. So
Did anybody talk to you?
when I walked through the door, the pastor, and I'm still learning terms and stuff, so I'm not sure what exactly he was, but the pastor was right there, shook my hand, asked me my name.
Oh, wow.
And asked talked to the kids and asked if they had little Bibles, because he could tell we're new, right?
Oh,
We're walking
yeah.
up with nothing. I had my purse.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, we're here for the first time. And he goes, oh my goodness, that's amazing. Can I get your name? We're gonna welcome you to the church. We're gonna talk about you today. And I was like, wow, that's overwhelming.
Yeah.
But it was great because it didn't give me the opportunity to run away. Right? Because if I get uncomfortable, I'm an introvert. I will recluse, to the back of the church and kind of sit in the back of the pews and just try to not be seen. But he welcomed me, just open arms, no questions asked, and it was great.
Amazing.
And my kids, he's like, let me take you on a little tour real quick. And we went to where the kids would go, which class they would be in, and we met the teachers and talked to them. And all this happened before the sermon. It was quick, but it was very genuine, and I felt very welcomed. So that's where I was like, I left there thinking, I had a big smile on my face, and I'm like, this was amazing. This is the best day I've ever had, and I was like, this is different. I like this. I joined the choir.
How cool.
Yeah, I love to sing. So I was like, if I could do anything, I want him to hear my voice. I was just so pumped and ready, to just give everything to God at that point. So I had an amazing experience on my first time with that church. And I went for quite a while with the kids. They both loved it. And like I said, they gave them their own little Bibles. They gave me a Bible. They welcomed me on stage, and I didn't go on stage. They just said my name and my kids' names and stuff. So that was great. It was a great experience.
I think it's such a good reminder too of welcoming anybody into the circle. And I have shared this, but I've felt convicted recently that it was oh man, I did in the beginning, and I saw somebody I've never seen before, and I just start a conversation, invite them to my home, let's do a Bible, invite them and try to do life with them. Right. And I started getting that group of friends, and I feel like that's kind of dwindled away. So you've 100% convicted me again to start opening the door, or even just turning around and be like, hey, what's your name?
Yeah, exactly. And that's all it takes sometimes, in my opinion. That would have helped me. But I did have a great experience that time. So that took that anxiety out of my heart and let me actually enjoy the experience.
Totally.
So I wasn't sitting there I get very kind of paranoid when people sit behind me. And after him introducing me to all these people, I didn't feel any anxiety about anybody sitting behind me.
Wow.
And I sat in the middle. I never sat in the middle.
Wow.
It was a big deal.
I think that literally shows exactly what it can do to make somebody feel like they belong and they're welcome.
Yep.
Not that it's a part of a club that you have to earn your way in. It's literally as soon as you walk into that door, you are family.
Yeah.
Come sit. Let's talk. Let me show you.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was. It was a very good experience, and I'm very grateful for it.
So on the topic of being new into church and starting fresh with not really a background in going to church or reading the Bible, I was really curious, what do you wish other Christians understood about what it's like to be new to the faith?
Well, I wish that they understood that when you're coming in, for example, my first time going to the church, I did get a lot of anxiety, relief from the instant, warm welcome.
Totally.
So that I think helped, and I honestly think now looking back that it was God giving me it's okay, it's okay, calm down, it's okay.
Yeah.
But it gave me the opportunity right then to actually be able to listen to what they were saying, and though I didn't understand it, I didn't feel anxiety about not understanding it.
Wow.
So I think that if people kind of understood a little more, we don't know what it means whenever you guys, I say you guys, that feels so bad. I'm sorry.
No, but genuinely, yeah.
But whenever you guys say, turn to this page, we're going to talk about this today. And it just doesn't make any sense to us, I guess, because maybe because I just don't know how to read the Bible. I recently have started front to back is what I'm doing, because that's how you read a book. So so it's confusing. It always was confusing to me that they skipped around the Bible a lot, but nobody explained to me how the Bible was set up, that it was different stories written by different people. Nobody told me that. You told me that.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
Oh.
And I was like, what? No way. Like,
Yeah.
I had no clue. So, like, if there's, I don't know, maybe if they, whenever you are there new, maybe they ask, what is your knowledge? How much do you know? How in depth have you been? And maybe what would help you learn? What would help you today?
Yeah.
Because that would have helped me, like, just knowing that simple thing. I was like, oh, okay, you go to the book of John. Like,
Totally.
like, that would have been so much easier than thinking that there's like 5,000 different stories written by individual people.
Yeah.
Is how I perceived it, because I never knew.
Totally.
So that right there would take personally,
Yeah.
that probably would have helped.
And I think we can skip over a lot of those things that we had to learn ourselves, and then just assume that it's like common knowledge when I wasn't born knowing that, you know what I mean? Like, I had to learn that.
Yeah. And the jargon, a lot of the words.
Christianese.
Yeah. It's confusing.
Totally.
Very confusing. And it makes no sense.
Yeah.
Especially because, like, I don't really understand, like you said, the blood of Christ and stuff. It's like, I've heard that my whole life. I understand that. But what does it mean? Where did it come from? What story is it attached to? How do I find out how that started?
Yeah.
That's what I want to know.
Have you found anything helpful while trying to, like, piece those things together?
Well, honestly, I just asked Mateo.
Oh, yeah. So finding a seasoned believer then.
Yeah. Yeah. Just someone that you can pick their brain and be like, and I will sit there and be like, okay, but what about, and like, it'll be a 3-hour conversation because I just want to know more. Like, tell me more. I'm excited to learn more.
Yeah.
I'm excited to know, but help me with the verbiage,
Totally.
so I can understand what you guys are talking about whenever I do just jump in and hear a preacher talking, and be like, oh, hey, I've heard that before.
Yeah.
I understand that word now.
Yeah.
Or I understand the terminology that you're using or the situation.
Totally.
Because sometimes me and my son have been reading the Bible, and he likes the book of John. We started there, which was, again, confusing for me.
Sure.
Because I didn't know what happened before that.
Yeah.
So they're talking about people from back then, and I'm like, well, who are those people?
Totally.
So that's confusing to new people as well. But there's been times where him and I are reading, and he doesn't understand something, and I'm like, well, let's go ask Google. Like, I'm not afraid to ask Google. It's got to tell me something, right? So just having someone, I think, to understand or to walk you through what it is so you can understand, that would be awesome.
100%.
A seasoned Christian.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I feel like almost any church you could find either somebody that's older, or you can find somebody, but I get there's a step where it's like asking.
Yeah, like, who do you ask?
Yeah, honestly, it's like, who's the craziest Christian I know? And like, let me go to that person. They'd love to help, but
and that's the thing is, like, it feels like a burden, because all that stuff to them, in my opinion, this is how I would perceive it, is, oh, that's so minuscule. Why are you so worried about that? And it's like, no, but I had a question. Please answer it. So I've heard that too.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about that. Like, that's the littlest, whatever. And it's like, but I had the question and I'm curious.
Yeah.
So that's also, just because it's not important to them, it is important to us.
Totally.
So.
I think a lot of times that can come from the person not knowing the answer, and they don't want to look dumb too. Because if you're already going to them for advice, they're like, oh, like, they think highly of me. They're asking for advice on the Bible. And then it's like, I don't know. And it's like, oh, yeah, we don't need to know that. Don't worry about it,
Yeah.
So I could see that.
Yeah. And I do, even coming to you sometimes, I do feel a little bit like, not like a burden, but like, I feel like maybe I annoy you.
Never.
Or like, and I know you're always so receptive. Like, you're amazing. Don't worry about that. But it's just that initial feeling of like, I don't want to bother, and that's a concern too, probably for a lot of new people in the faith.
Dude, I love any person that's like deeper in their faith too. Like, it's a joy to share. It's like, oh my gosh, let me tell you. And like, oh my gosh, like, let me think deeper about that. What is sanctification? What is conviction? What are the fruit of the Spirit? And like explaining it, it's grown my faith so much, because I've had to be like, wait, what do I believe about this? And like really like diving
Where do
deeper.
I stand?
Exactly. I love it. And obviously I like talking about God and Jesus and stuff like that too. Here we are on the podcast. But I think almost any Christian that's like in their faith would enjoy to do that as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think it comes down to, one, finding somebody that you are comfortable with.
Yeah.
And that might not be somebody in the church that you go to. It might be a family member. It might, because as a beginner, I'm going to call it a beginner Christian.
Level 1. Yeah.
Right? Level 1, entry level here. It is so scary. And then not only are you just like going in and feeling stupid right off the bat because you don't understand anything, but you don't know anybody.
Yeah.
And some people, I'm not being mean, but some of the people are just like, they kind of look stuck up and they're not approachable.
Yeah.
You know, so then there's that. And then it's like, okay, well, who's the right person when you don't know anybody?
Totally.
It's like, do you talk to the preacher at that point? And maybe they give you a little Christian battle buddy kind of thing. Like, how does this work?
Yeah, I totally get that.
So
I've never thought of it from that perspective too. Is like, who do I go to if I don't know anybody?
Yeah.
I now being like in church more, I feel like I'd probably go to like the prayer team up in the front or something.
Yeah,
like
I would have never known they had one.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's like, how do you know? But yeah, trying to grab somebody that works at the church and just be like, hey, like, I want to learn more. Like, but you know, I've done that before.
Yeah.
I did that at a church in Missouri, and I instantly was like, I don't want to be involved here anymore. Because it was like, I was like, hey, like, do you guys have like a Bible study? I want to join. Like, this is so cool. And she was like, oh, yeah, I think Debbie has one, but it's kind of like like we have a group and I guess you can come. But like, it was literally.
That's off-putting.
I know. And I was like, I don't feel welcome. I don't want to go.
See, that too. And it's like, okay, but I thought we were all here to share.
Yeah. On the opposite side though, at my CrossFit gym in Texas, it was the craziest thing. Like, I said something about like, yeah, it was a total God thing. And then one of the girls was like, oh my gosh, we have a Bible study. Do you want to come? Like, as soon as she knew that I was like,
it's like instant.
Yes. And so it was like completely different. Instantly welcomed into the group. And like, I needed community so deeply at that time. And it was such an answered prayer. So
that's good.
I think it's kind of like, there's going to be rejection. There's going to be groups.
Yeah.
Don't take like either a no or an off, you know.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I think that back to like, I think everything happens for a reason.
Totally.
Like, God is pushing you in the right direction. Take it.
Yeah.
Stop resisting.
Yeah, 100%.
And if those people aren't right, if you get that feeling, it's like there's a reason for that.
Totally.
They're not your people.
Yeah.
You know?
100%. So to anybody who is earlier in their walk, maybe like, you know, I know you've grown in your faith a lot. So to somebody who is just starting over, that they're at like ground one, what advice would you give them?
There's so many variables to that.
Sure.
Oh my goodness. Like, do they know anybody in the faith? Do they have anybody that can hold their hand?
Worst case scenario.
All right. So I say, what would they do initially?
Like, what advice would you
What
give
advice would I give to them? I would say, man, that's a loaded question. Just do it. Just go to church, ask questions, and don't be afraid, because I was that person. And it took me, over 20 years. And here we are, finally, you know, and my life could have been completely different had I grown in my faith sooner. And I do have a little bit of regret from that, but I'm here now. And I think that if someone could find a person or even a podcast to listen to, or, you know, like we were talking about Jordan Peterson, that's kind of where I got my curiosities. Maybe look at those things first so you feel a little more comfortable talking about it, because sometimes, like, not everybody is so, I guess, receptive of people believing in God.
Yeah.
You know, there's backlash everywhere.
Totally.
So, like, you talk about God in the wrong setting and, like, you might get backlash.
Yeah.
So there has to be like a safety net of some sort. So find maybe some good points to know and ground yourself first before you go and jump into it. And then, like, just ask people questions.
Totally. I want to encourage you to go back, because you said you had a slight regret for maybe not coming to a close relationship with Christ sooner. But I want to also say, like, it literally says that he works everything for the good of those who love him. And God is not a God where there's wasted time. He makes up tenfold.
Yeah.
Like, there's no such thing as, man, shoulda, coulda, woulda. It's literally like, you've accepted Christ in your life. He will change every part that was meant for evil to be good. he will not let any time be wasted. Like, he makes up for that in such a way that is so powerful. And at the end, it's like, I needed that. Mm-hmm. And you can reach people in a way that others can't now because of your own testimony. Yeah. Like, it's so powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's not a shoulda, coulda, woulda. And I hope that one day it's not seen as a regret.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. Ashley, thank you for being on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful.
It's been good. Let's go. A lot of technical issues, but we made it.
We're not chipmunks anymore.